cloud of smoke that's actually coming off of that device. So versus a traditional or combustible cigarette, which has about 7,000 different chemicals in it, that vape cloud we know of has about 60 dangerous chemicals in it, things of which are like metal particles and formaldehyde. And so most young people don't understand what formaldehyde is, so we explain to them that's what they put in your body when you die. So we talk to our students about not only firsthand smoke coming off of these devices, but second and third hand ingestion of these different types of chemicals that they're breathing in when they're utilizing these devices. So as you see here, these are battery operated versus fire, again for the combustible cigarette, when we're utilizing these devices. So the chemicals that come off of that, there's the flavoring that's put into them, and the marketing has been strategic for our youth. And I heard somebody earlier talking about Juul and how much money they've made, $39 billion. $39 billion. So yeah, they've made a little bit of money. And when we talk about Juul specifically, this is what a Juul is. Okay, so when you say it looks like a flash drive, it actually charges right in the side of a computer. Okay, these pods, this is equivalent to a pack of cigarettes. One pack of cigarettes right there, folks. These devices that you see up here were seized at our middle schools. Okay, these are not something that we went out and purchased. Okay, these are all seized, and what we do is our police department often will let us hold on to these devices so that we can bring them around and show folks like you. So we know one combustible cigarette, you get about 1 milligram of nicotine. One Juul pod, it's 20 cigarettes worth of nicotine. So again, this little guy right here, 20 cigarettes. Our young people are going to the bathroom about every 30 minutes to an hour to utilize these. And because it's chemicals that's coming off of these devices, it dissipates very quickly, unlike that traditional cigarette smoke, and it lingers, and you walk through it and you're like, man, who just smoked a cigarette? With these, it smells like fruity lotion. So it's very deceiving, so oftentimes we're like, did somebody just vape, or did they put on hand lotion? Which will prompt a lot of different investigations. We are handling it very, very proactively in our schools to ensure that we're catching this early, because we know one of the biggest risk factors for addiction is age at first use. And when you talk to folks who are addicted to substances, it's alcohol, tobacco, and marijuana is their gateway drugs. Okay, so these are the things that we look at. So when we're looking at that, anything over 7% nicotine, okay, is considered potential for nicotine poisoning. You can be poisoned by nicotine. Nausea, vomiting, increased blood pressure because nicotine is a stimulant. Stimulants increase the heart rate, they increase the blood pressure. Abnormal heart rate, dehydration, loss of appetite, fatigue. And we think, wow, it seems like a lot of our teenagers. So we have to be cautious. Again, we don't want to falsely accuse a young person, but we also want to, again, be very proactive in how we're managing electronic cigarettes. So when we're looking at this, so this just gives you an idea of what different types of electronic cigarettes are. So again, we have our Juul, okay? This is a vape pen. Now again, when you're refilling this tank right here, there's no control of the nicotine that's going into this device. Okay, our young people will say, well, you know, I got that bottle of juice and it's got 5% nicotine. When you go to utilize that, how are you know for sure you're getting 5% nicotine out of that? There's no way to measure that nicotine that's going into that device. Now, probably a lot of you have seen the more traditional mods. Okay, every one of these devices is metal, folks. Okay, when metal heats up, that could be a problem. These can also blow up. Okay, then you have your Sorin, just another brand. The juice goes in the top of this. And these we'll leave these out for you guys to look at and come if you want to smell what they smell like, because they still have some of the juice in them. But the one that's really concerning us right now is called a Puffit. It's made to look just like an inhaler. That's an electronic cigarette. And you'll see the different prices. When Juul first came out, you could get your starter pack for $50. Right before the holidays, they had them on sale, $9.99 at 7-Eleven. And it was like for your starter pack. So because of the public information that's gone out about the different flavoring, that some of the local businesses have started to detach from some of the flavorings. However, not every place has, okay? So when we talk about those different flavorings, we talk about flavorings like gummy bear and cotton candy and blue raspberry and mango and fruit medley. They don't sound bad. Okay, when you look at the marketing for these devices, it's really pretty people. Remember back to when cigarettes first came out and how it was all models and they were holding their cigarette very strategically, and it took years and years and years for us to find out how bad cigarettes were. Fortunately, we're learning a little bit sooner some of the effects of these electronic cigarettes, but not all of them. There's a lot of information that's yet to come because of the longitudinal data. Okay, 17.3 million individuals currently use electronic cigarettes. Our data tells us 1 in 20 8th graders admits to using an electronic cigarette in the past 30 days. 1 in 9 high school students admits to using an electronic cigarette in the past 30 days. If you know high schoolers, think of a group of 10. One of them is using an electronic cigarette. So here's some of the advertisements and the flavors. So again, I got your gummy saver flavors, Fruit Loops, even our ice cream bars from the ice cream truck. Okay, here's your marketing. They look like they're having a really good time. Okay, they're not showing you what can happen if you get something called popcorn lung. Okay, they're not telling us about that or about a vape blowing up. Okay, or different lung illnesses that can occur. We're not seeing that in these advertisements, just like we didn't see when nicotine and tobacco products first came out. Okay, just some more examples of the different flavoring, folks. So how are they obtaining these? Okay, 74%, they're going to a retail location. I once polled one of my 8th grade classes at Williamsburg. I said, how many of you know where to go today and buy an electronic cigarette? 100% of them answered, I do. They raised their hand. We see kids getting them on eBay. Parents buy prepaid gift cards thinking that's the best thing ever. Don't do that. They are using those prepaid gift cards to go on places like Amazon where it's not tracked, and they're sending them to the self-storage lockers at places like the grocery store or the Amazon lockers. Okay, so again, a little bit more. They're also getting them from older brothers, older siblings. Real quickly, our APS Substance Use Policy says you cannot possess a tobacco product while on school property. Okay, you can't have the paraphernalia, you can't have the charger, you can't have the pod. That is a suspendable offense. Fortunately, we do have a program called Second Chance for a first offense substance abuse violation. That's an alternative to suspension. That gives a kid a literal second chance and an opportunity to make changes. Okay, in our schools, we do one-to-one counseling support. We do prevention activities. We have youth advisory committees. We present to parents, PTAs, staff. Our staff are very well trained. Okay, and then we'll have time at the end for questions. But, again, I will leave these devices up here at the end. You can feel free to take a look at them. Thank you.
Jenny, thank you. That's a little scary. Old people like me, this is outside of my experience, but I'm going to go smell one of these right now. It smells good. Okay, next is Dr. Ruben Varghese, and Jenny was on the school level, and Dr. Varghese is on the county-wide level. He's the county public health director.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you for having me here. Let me put this diagram up. What I'm trying to maybe talk about is the role, what you can think about for government being part of all of this. And so I wanted to give you an example of what was called by Tom Frieden, who was the director of CDC several years ago, called the Health Impact Pyramid. And what I want to remind people is how public health practice, can you hear me now? And go ahead, pass that out. How public health, first of all, thinks about effective policies, and then I'll discuss, hopefully with time, with how it intersects with government. So a lot of people think about one-to-one counseling. You know, you go to your doctor or your counselor and you learn about health education. So as Jenny was doing that, if that was done with one-on-one, you know, sounds wonderful, but you know, we don't actually have enough for even 200,000 people, and you don't necessarily need to do it always one-to-one. It's actually been shown this is not necessarily the most effective way to get behavior change. Because we're talking about what you all have to think about as a community is what sort of behavior change do you want for especially adolescents who are going to be risk takers, and we're not going to change their biology. So asking the question, how do we change the circumstances around the kids to make it that they'll eventually choose the right things to do to not harm themselves. Clinical interventions like treatments for blood pressure, anyone who takes high blood pressure medication, that's what a clinical intervention is. There is no clinical intervention at the moment to stop people from using this. Long-lasting protective interventions. There are no vaccines to prevent you from smoking. Changing the context to make individuals' default decisions healthy. That's a fancy way of saying, can you change the circumstances in society that you're going to choose, be more likely to do the healthy behavior rather than the risky behavior? There are a number of examples that society has done things like that. Fluoridating water, smoke-free laws, tobacco tax. The tobacco tax actually is the primary reason you'll see that over the years there's been a reduction in smoking rates, and there's a gradation based on wherever you live. The average tobacco tax for Virginia, the tobacco tax is, I believe, 30 cents at this point per pack. The average for the nation is $1.81, and the tax, the highest part of that tax is in New York State at $4.35. This is a couple years ago. If you look at New York City, the cost of a pack of cigarettes is $13. Most of that is tax. When you see the high taxes, as a general rule, there's been a correlation to see declines in smoking rates. So, because exactly, you have to be really motivated to smoke in New York City. But as that has happened, there has not been the same sort of regulation or tobacco tax for these sorts of products. So I'm reminding you, you have levers, but you have to decide as a group. There's a quote from Teddy Roosevelt that I love, which I'm going to butcher if I don't read it. The government is us. We are the government, you and I. Okay, we have a tendency to say, all right, yes, I work for government. You can go, Ruben's the government. Okay, but remember, we're the ones who actually, in a sense, if we believe in the democracy that we live in, we help influence it. So you all have to decide what is it you want and how would you like to do it. Obviously, if you can change socioeconomic factors, that's probably even harder to do, but you'll have more of a population impact. And we're talking about the impact on adolescents. When you start at the top, it's small. As you go down, it's large. So these are some of the things I need you to start thinking about, because you are a type of governance body. What do you want to do? Even if when you select these sorts of topics, are you going to go out and talk about these things and say what matters, what doesn't? Because we're not going to change adolescents' risk-taking behavior. That's kind of part and parcel with the development of kids. So just some of the things that you may need to know on the government side. Federal, obviously FDA is really the one that has primary control of tobacco at this point. But even though we've known about tobacco's influence, it only had full jurisdiction over tobacco in 2009. And only in 2016 did e-cigarettes got added to that. Just things you need to be aware of. And so on the state level, I've told you about the state tax at 30 cents on tobacco products. Another thing about Virginia that you probably know about is the Dillon Rule. If anyone know the Dillon Rule? Okay. For those who didn't raise their hand, essentially, I mean, this is my shorthand. Arlington faces it all the time. What hasn't been officially granted as authority from the General Assembly or the Constitution isn't something you can just presume you can do. So when one of the Board of Supervisors here wanted a trans fat ban back in the early aughts when I was here, we had to tell them, we can't do that. We did education, but we couldn't do what Montgomery County did and have a trans fats ban. So why do I mention that? Cities in Virginia in general can actually have tobacco taxes. I don't know the actual reason why, but whereas counties can't. So Arlington has never pursued that. These are things that you can think about. As far as I know, there is no tax on e-cigarettes because they're not in the same category. There are policy changes that you can think about, but the flip side is, while I may not know all of it, there are people who are going to argue if you do that with e-cigarettes, well, you could be preventing some people having access to treatment options to get off of cigarettes. Never easy decisions you have to think about. I just wanted to make sure that people knew about some of the things we do locally, because they're not going to be on that level, but our school board adopted a policy to regulate the presence of e-cigarettes in schools. So something that can be done. Public health staff, I wanted to introduce my colleague, Dr. Lisa Kaplowitz. She educates folks in the school system and others about things like vaping on the clinical side. And when the respiratory illness with vaping happened across the nation, the Virginia Department of Health, which we're a part of, as the Arlington branch, we worked with our provider community and the hospitals to actually investigate the cases, get the right information to VDH and the CDC so they could try to see were there patterns that could be identified as to what the causes were behind it. So that's what we in public health do as part of your government to help with that sort of stuff. It's what we're doing with coronavirus, not related to vaping, just to make sure. But that's, in a sense, a government response to public health. So I think that's where I'm going to leave it. I can take questions with everyone else, and you'll probably be wondering why I have a hat box.
Thank you, Ruben. Okay, Dylan.
Yes, sir.
Dylan Bishop is a lobbyist for the Virginia Smoke-Free Association. And he has a video for us too, and it's already up. Cool. And Dylan, take it away.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. I'll use this mic. My name is Dylan Bishop. I represent the Virginia Smoke-Free Association, which is the state association of vape shops. I also represent the Vapor Technology Association, which is the federal lobbying group for the vapor industry. There we go. So what is VSFA? We represent, like I said, the 300 to 400 vape shops in Virginia. The largest member is Avail Vapor. They have 31 locations here, but most members are small businesses, mom and pop shops, one store owned by one family, one person. If I can steal my colleague's props here, we sell these products. We sell the open systems. These are sold in vape shops that are run like ABC stores. You have to be 21 to enter. You get your ID scanned when you purchase. All they sell are these open systems. These are the Juul products. These are closed pod systems. These are sold at convenience stores where any kid can go into, buy a candy bar, buy a soda. So I'm going to be distinguishing between these two products pretty often during my presentation. You already know what a nicotine vapor product is. I won't trespass upon your time on that. So vapor products aren't all bad. We bill ourselves as tobacco harm reduction. The FDA has recognized something called a continuum of risk. That means that some products are more dangerous than others. Cigarettes are on the extreme far end on the continuum of risk. Then you've got oral tobacco, you've got different tobacco products, then you've got vapor products, and the Nicorette patches at the very end of that continuum of risk. Public Health England has recognized vaping products as 95% safer than smoking. I'm not saying it's safe. All of our vendors, if somebody comes into our shops and They say, oh, I want to try vaping. They say, if you don't smoke, don't start vaping now. But it is a safer alternative to cigarettes. It is an off-ramp from a deadly plague in our society. Cigarettes kill 1,300 people a day in the United States. Vaping is twice as effective as FDA-approved nicotine patches and lozenges at helping adults quit smoking. This was in the New England Journal of Medicine. As the health professionals here, I'm sure will attest, the New England Journal of Medicine is the gold letter when it comes to medicinal journals. It's where Harvard's located, Princeton, the highest of our academic locations. And this was in the Richmond Times-Dispatch this past fall. Most experts agree that e-cigarette vapor is less harmful than cigarette smoke because it does not contain most of the cancer-causing chemicals in burning tobacco. There is a significant difference. These products contain a glycerin, which is a compound of sugar. That's the vehicle in which the liquid nicotine and the flavoring is held. And then there's liquid nicotine, of course, and then the flavoring components. All of these products, I should mention, are FDA registered. There aren't the chemicals that cause popcorn lung in there anymore. You don't have adulterants in these products that are inherently dangerous because, like I said, all of these products are FDA registered. Every single ingredient in these vapor products are approved by the FDA. Like I said previously, there are two significantly different products. You've got the big open system, which is sold at vape shops, very large, very hard to conceal, not really the products used by children or kids. Then you've got the Juul product. This is the product that is a cancer on the vapor industry. This is our bad egg. I do not represent Juul, admittedly, so I need to be clear about that. Like I said, these open systems are sold almost exclusively in vape shops that operate like an ABC store. The nicotine levels in these open systems, you can actually taper them down. They come in 24 milligrams of nicotine per milliliter of solution, 18, 12, 6, 3, 2, and 0. And this is about 30% of the vapor market. The closed or pod-based systems are extremely high in nicotine. You cannot really taper your nicotine intake. They've got nicotine levels in the Juul product of 30 milligrams of nicotine per milliliter and 50. That's 3% THC, nicotine. I'm getting to the THC. That's not a Freudian slip, I can assure you. And 50, which is 50 milligrams of nicotine per milliliter, which is 5%. And these are the products that are preferred by children. And you don't have to take my word for it. You can take Dr. Scott Gottlieb's word for it. You may have heard the name because he was the commissioner of the FDA. And he says, he makes a clear distinction between open tank systems and closed systems. The open tank vape systems have different patterns of use than cartridge or pod-based products like the Juul product. The open tank systems are largely used by adults. Pods are the most widely abused products by kids. Differently situated products can be treated differently. And in fact, they are. Just this fall, the FDA implemented a flavor ban. In the Juul products, you can only buy a tobacco-flavored product or a mint-flavored product. But the FDA specifically exempted the open tank systems because according to their data, that's not the product that's being used by our youth. So why would you shut down an off-ramp for a product that adults are using to quit smoking if that's not causing the issue that we're trying to address? So this is a chart from the New England Journal of Medicine that was based off data pulled in the National Youth Tobacco Survey. We heard a lot about flavors. We've had flavored products in the U.S. market since 2007. As you can see, the youth vaping epidemic didn't start till 2016. Either flavors aren't the causal factor, or there's a 9-year lag. I think any reasonable person looking at this data can see that flavors aren't the causal factor. Well, now what happened in 2016? That's when the proliferation of the Juul product happened. The Juul product came out in 2015, and it became widely used in 2016. That's when youth usage started to rise. So again, I'm hearkening on the distinction between these closed pod-based products like the Juul and the open system products. So ineffective ways of curbing youth usage. Flavor bans. Like I said, flavors are not the causal factor. What you do when you ban flavors and products used by adults is you limit them to a tobacco-flavored vapor product. When you smoke cigarettes, you sear your olfactory senses. You retard your sense of smell and taste. When you transition away from smoking, you start to get your olfactory senses coming back. The last thing a recovering smoker wants to taste is tobacco. It's like giving a recovering alcoholic non-alcoholic beer and telling them good luck. That's not how you disassociate yourself with an addiction. Also, taxation works to an extent to disincentivize behavior. But if you tax a product high enough such that normal economic models don't apply, you get a black market. When you get a black market sellers, they're already operating outside the rules of the law. They don't care if you're 19 or 18 or 22. So it actually proliferates youth usage. For example, the Heartland Institute did a study in Pennsylvania where they implemented a 39% wholesale tax. When that happened within a year, over 50% of the state's vape shops shut down, the legitimate vapor industry. Thereafter, the youth usage actually increased because you didn't have legitimate businesses checking IDs and running legitimate operations. You had a proliferation of black market products. And I've got one more slide, so I'll be wrapping up here. Let's see. If you'll bear with me for 1 second. The reason why I mentioned THC earlier, I had in my notes. So we heard both speakers talk about respiratory illnesses tied to vapor products. There was a spout of respiratory illnesses tied to vapor products, but it was tied to illicit black market, primarily THC cartridges, not nicotine cartridges. Now that's according to the CDC, and it's on the CDC's website. It's public. Anybody can look it up. But we talked about the proliferation of black market products when you tax something high enough where the legitimate economic models fail. Pennsylvania, the same anecdotal story I mentioned to you, where they tax legitimate vapor shops out of the market. They have an almost identical demographic and population to Virginia. They had as many as 3 times as many cases of respiratory illnesses as did Virginia. And that's because you tax the vapor products there outside of legitimate markets, and the illicit black market products came in and flooded the market. So there are effective means of curbing youth use. Ban online sales, like the young lady mentioned earlier. Kids are using that as the primary vehicle to get in these products. Required all vapor products to come out of convenience stores where kids can easily come in. They're common customers. Put them in vape shops that have to operate similar to ABC stores. You have to be 21 to enter, and require third-party age verification purchase. But there's nothing, absolutely nothing, that can replace attentive parenting. So thank you very much.
Okay, Jenny and Ruben and Dylan, if you'll take your seats here. And as usual, folks, Hannah, get her attention and you'll be able to ask a question. And I hope she doesn't have to pry that microphone away from any of the cold hands from making long speeches. Don't make long speeches. Just ask a quick question so they can get some answers. Okay?
Sorry. Hannah, go ahead. He was saying, please make sure to ask your question in the form of a question and reduce speech time so that our speakers can share their expertise. Did that work?
Got
Hello, my name is Marty Klein. My question is, could you explain a little bit more about non-nicotine products and non-nicotine vaping? I really don't understand how this all fits together.
So there's different types of juices that can be purchased for these devices. So they do make vapor juice that goes into these devices that does not contain nicotine, but the majority of the juices that are being put out, and specifically in the Juul pod, in the open tanks, by the way, this was seized from a 7th grade student, the amount of that, the majority of those are going the nicotine because of the stimulant. So the nicotine in these electronic cigarettes is just exactly the same type of nicotine that's going into a traditional combustible cigarette. It's just different flavorings. So when you look at a bottle of the vape juice that goes into it, it's in real tiny little letters, the percentage of nicotine that's in it, if it has any. And these kids are not paying attention to it. So that's why it's become dangerous, because that nicotine, it's a stimulant effect, and that's what's causing these young people to become addicted to these substances.
And the products I was referring to are marijuana is the active ingredient. Those are the illicit products that were tied to the spat of respiratory illnesses according to the CDC this summer. So that would be marijuana derivatives as opposed to tobacco derivatives.
And we actually see THC oil in our schools as well. However, that was also the majority of pods that are coming across the United States via border and customs protection are actually counterfeit pods, and that actually contain cyanide as well as different constituents, so it wasn't just specifically the THC oil.
Charlie had a question.
Yeah, Charlie Clark. I was wondering whether any parents have objected to the school policies of suspension or second chance and confiscation.
We are fortunate in the way that we manage these situations in school to provide these young people with an opportunity to get a second chance. And our second chance program, being an alternative to suspension, actually will have that suspension erased from their record as though it never happened for their first offense. So parents are often very grateful that we're giving their child that opportunity, because we've certainly done so much education on these devices that they understand that there's a good amount of peer pressure, a good amount of curiosity surrounding those. So the way that we present it is in a way that we help parents understand that we're there to support them and help them through the challenge, but also for their students, and help them be able to move past it as though it never happened. But we as the substance abuse counselors also continue to provide that young person support throughout their duration of their APS career in some capacity, in an effort to prevent any further issues from happening.
Just wanted to follow up. The Second Chance program actually came out of the first public health initiative called Destination 20.
Yeah, make sure it's on there, Ruben.
Okay. Can you hear me? Hello? Can you hear me now?
That's
okay.
better.
So Second Chance came out of the first public health planning process in 2007 called Destination 2017. And the purpose, as Johnny talked about, is to give that second chance. What I'm trying to make sure, though, is spread the word, because not all parents know about it. And it's really unfortunate if some parents don't know about it, and if they don't talk about it in the schools, kids could end up getting more harm from the suspension that could have been diverted. So I just want to make sure we can get that message out.
And as a follow-up, regardless of the school policy, it is now federal law for anyone under the age of 21 to possess a nicotine vapor product or any tobacco product. So it is a criminal offense for any person under the age of 21. No exceptions, not even a military exception, for anybody under the age of 21 to possess these products.
Jean Broyhill, I'm a little confused about what's causing the lung problem. I mean, the popcorn lung, is that from the chemicals in the flavoring, or is it in both the open pod as well as a closed pod? Or
So the popcorn lung was tied to a vanilla flavoring that was most prevalent in candy products, but the phrase came from a popcorn factory in the Midwest where they were, or excuse me, not vanilla flavoring, but butter flavoring. That was around very early in the early 2000s. It was immediately snubbed out of all legitimate vapor products. Like I said, all of the products that are sold out of legitimate stores and out of legitimate manufacturers are FDA registered. So that would only be present in an illicit or black market product that's been adulterated or doctored.
Next, please. Yeah, there's one.
My name is Marjorie Hobart, and my question is for the lobbyist. You say that these are FDA registered products. There's no equal mark between FDA registered and not dangerous, is there?
I can't speak for the FDA, but I'm certain that they would not approve these to enter interstate commerce if there were concomitant risk. But I'd invite my my colleague to my right here to speak on that.
So, can you hear me now? Yes. Okay. So you realize the FDA even licenses or registers medicines, but you'll notice doctors will never say medicines are entirely safe. Okay, because you can't usually claim 100% safety. So keep that in mind. And as far as I know, there are no double-blind randomized controlled trials of use of nicotine products on people. So it's a legal product, which is different from saying everything's safe. But to be fair, alcohol is legal and it has issues. So we have to keep in mind we have products out there that have both positives and not so good depending on how they're used. I'm going to focus on the kids. If we can prevent them, not disputing the product may be useful for getting people off. Is there any purpose in getting children, and I'm not saying the industry is trying to do that, I am going back to the community perspective. How do we help support children who are adolescents who are developmentally going to have risk-taking behavior? How do we do it? Create the environment around them. And parents are part of our village, your village. How are we going to help them here in Arlington, in addition to what the region, the state, and the federal government will do to try to support that, so that, you know, these are our future citizens. Will make us resilient. So we need to help them safely become resilient in that period where they take risks.
One other thing, too, that we're not mentioning is research also shows us that when people start using these devices, within 6 months they're smoking cigarettes. So, again, there is such a strong correlation between the nicotine in these devices and a nicotine in a combustible cigarette that we're completely missing. So, I mean, that's just a little bit more data for you to have that, you know, the safety and effectiveness of these. Harm reduction is different things like getting Narcan on the street for opiates and opioids. And yes, perhaps these do have some safety value for harm reduction, but when people are, you know, purchasing these vials of juice, they're not diminishing their quantity that they're taking in. They're not tapering it down. They're continuing to stay at that high level because the reason that they're doing this is because it makes them feel different, even for a temporary period of time. So they want to continue that different feeling. If they start to reduce it or decrease it, they're not going to feel the same. So they're seeking that different feeling.
Question. Yes.
I'm Judy Haddon. I have a question for Jenny. We're lucky in Arlington to have substance abuse counselors, but I have a few questions about that. So, how many do Arlington schools have, and how many students would you be responsible for, and how many schools are you responsible for? And also, the earliest age you've experienced a student getting involved with these kinds of with vaping?
So there's 7 substance abuse counselors in Arlington County Public Schools. So in some capacity, every elementary, middle, and high school has a substance abuse counselor that provides support to them. Me specifically, I have 26 schools, so I have 24 elementary schools and 2 middle schools. So yes, we are stretched thin, but we are certainly, ensuring that we are there supporting all of our students. Number-wise, I'm not sure exactly of our numbers, but it's definitely, we're targeting our younger and younger, and the youngest we've seen is 6th grade. However, because of those numbers is why we're now in the 5th grades doing presentations. So we do prevention presentations in 5th grade. So we've done 3 so far. I have 1 at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. There's 6 more scheduled with the hope of having all 24 schools accomplished by the end of the year. So we don't just talk about alcohol, tobacco, and electronic cigarettes. We talk about peer pressure and refusal skills. And we also take the devices to show the kids, and 5th graders know specifically what the Juul is. So we talk to them about if they see something, say something, to not pick these up, to talk to a trusted adult. So we really work with them on how to effectively manage these types of situations. But the reason we're in elementary schools this year is because we did see an increase over the past couple of years in our 6th grade violations.
And if I could follow up on that, another reason why you're seeing additional educational resources diverted to anti-vaping education in schools, Virginia Smoke-Free Association 2 years ago actually sponsored a bill requiring local school boards to educate K through 5 students on anti-vaping measures. I believe it was Delegate Mark Keem. I think he may be in Alexandria, but we worked with Delegate Mark Keem on that bill 2 years ago. So that's something that we're proud to say that we supported, helped get across the line.
So historically, the elementary schools did Too Smart to Start. However, they no longer have that, which is where we come in. So we actually collaborate with our school resource officers and put on the presentations for 5th grade. And we created the curriculums and aligned them with the health and PE SOLs and also the second step curriculum.
Just as a reminder, we have aides and nurses from the Public Health Division in the schools, and if they identify children this way, they'll make referrals to substance abuse counselors. This has been in place for at least 30 years.
Chuck, go ahead.
I think I'm Chuck Morley. I think you've answered my question more or less. My question was, you have these kids that smoke this stuff to get rid of stress or anxiety, to make them feel more comfortable, and what do you offer as a substitute? And I assume it's substance abuse program.
So what we do is intensive education. We'll offer them the opportunity for our Second Chance program. We will do one-to-one counseling support with them. We do health and PE class presentations. So our goal by the end of the year is 100% of each of our health and PE classes, all the way through 10th grade, is given substance abuse education. So we stair-step it every year to get a little bit more in-depth information. So now that's starting in 5th grade. So it'll go 5th through 10th grade every year. Our students will have that opportunity. So what we do is we really work to provide a full trust circle around our students that are at higher risk, to ensure that we are getting them the proper support externally and internally to help them be successful. And our ultimate goal is to get them their education. So if they have these hindrances and they are utilizing these products and becoming addicted, that could be a hindrance towards their education. So we work diligently with the whole child in an effort to get them their education first and foremost.
Anything
I'd like to
add?
actually use my prop now.
It's a cake, isn't it?
Absolutely, it's a cake, absolutely.
Hat.
Rather than nesting dolls, this, so I'm assuming everyone's worried about possibly kids dying, mortality. Okay? Mortality. So people may be worried about the long-term effects of anyone being affected by this. Well, the worst case long-term effect from a health perspective would be death. Okay? But death occurs within a context. In public health and medicine, we've learned that disease and injury are the things that lead to those things. that occurs within a context as well. And we used to think it was only risk behaviors. Vaping is a risk behavior, okay? But even when we try to do that health education, support that, the reason why I'm doing this is that anxiety that you're talking about occurs in a larger context. So we talk about community conditions. What are we doing to create and support people in their anxiety, the stresses? That's why I'm emphasizing not only what the parents are doing and what the schools are doing. What happens in schools is 8 hours a day, Monday through Friday. Parents need support as well. Yes, parents are part of this, but parents need support from us to help it make it easier to ask them, what's going on that's creating anxiety? So I'm just challenging all of you to think about what can we do as a community with whatever levers we have to create the better community conditions so that all our kids who are facing this have real opportunities to make healthy choices, healthy behaviors, not risk behaviors.
Yeah, Brian had one.
I'm Brian Marking. So you spoke to us a little bit about what the industry or the bill that you supported, the Virginia Smoke Free Association. But I'm curious, what other, since you made the distinction between the bad egg, in the industry versus the open pod system, what else is the industry doing to kind of address that, both the bad egg piece, and then for maybe the whole panel, what can we expect as far as, especially on a federal level, legislation or policy that addresses this? I mean, this even got kind of President Trump's attention recently, about the popcorn lung and all that, and as whether or not he took the right steps is up for debate. But what can we expect in the future with policy?
Sure. In terms of, I'll start with the federal action. First and foremost, the United States Congress made it illegal for anybody to possess or purchase these products unless you're over the age of 21. That eliminates the possibility of the 18-year-old high school senior buying these products and distributing it to other students. Secondly, the FDA came, like I said, this fall with an enforcement mechanism where they are enforcing a flavor ban on pod-based products, but not on open products. That's addressing the problem with the products most frequently used by youth. What we're doing as an industry, we have proposed a regulatory framework to prohibit online sales of vapor products, because I think that's the avenue where it's easiest for youth to procure these products. Prohibit the sales of vapor products in convenience stores or grocery stores anywhere that's not age restricted. Like I said, most vape shops are operated like an ABC store. If we require all vapor products to be sold in an age-restricted facility like an ABC store, you're not going to have any mix-ups or confusions. Somebody that comes in that's young is going to stick out like a sore thumb. As part of our regulatory proposal, all the vapor shops would have to register with the Commonwealth. So too would all their manufacturers and distributors. So if we do find that there's a product that's causing ill effects, we can trace that to ground and stop that as quickly as possible. Secondly, we are proposing a nicotine cap. The European Union has implemented a nicotine cap of 20 milligrams of nicotine per milliliter. That's 2% by volume. The European Union has no flavor ban. It has a nicotine cap. It also doesn't have a youth epidemic like we have. And also, as part of our regulatory proposal, if we require all nicotine vapor products to be sold in age-restricted retailers, we would also mandate third-party age verification at the point of sale. That would be with an ID scan run against public records that has a 99.9% validation. It's very easy to catch fakes with this. The most commonly used fake IDs are IDs from out of state, because your retailers are not accustomed to seeing Nebraska licenses. They don't know what a legitimate Nebraska license looks like versus an illegitimate one. So I think these are narrowly tailored proposals that would address the problem without ham-fisted collateral damage that would be to the detriment to a legitimate industry, to legitimate small businesses, and a legitimate off-ramp to adult smokers that are looking for a less harmful alternative.
Okay, we have not much time left, but two more little questions here. Timon, and then Chanda back there.
Okay. Hi, Timon Honda. I have a question for Jenny and for Dylan. Jenny, you mentioned third-hand smoke in your presentation. Could you define that for me, because I have no idea what that is, and also what the relative risk of second and third-hand smoke of vaping is. Dylan, you mentioned, I think it was 2 milligrams per milliliter as a limit in the EU. Could you define that in terms of what that is relative to a cigarette?
So from our perspective, first hand would be the person that's actually utilizing the device. Second hand would be somebody within the close proximity. And then third hand would be somebody still within the realm of like an enclosed space. So because it's chemicals that's coming off of the devices, they're also taking those chemicals in and ingesting them as well.
I'm totally blanking on what you'd asked me. Oh, excuse me. Okay. Yeah. So the cap in the European Union is 20 milligrams per milliliter. That's 2% by volume. But there is a common misnomer in trying to compare these to cigarettes, because with even a Juul pod, for example, you're not smoking that all at once like you would a cigarette. Oftentimes, folks who vape with Juul products, that Juul pod's going to last them a week, maybe longer. But they're certainly not ingesting the entirety of the Juul pod at one time. That would be the equivalent of smoking an entire pack of cigarettes at one time.
Not to interrupt, but our students report that they'll go through 2 to 3 pods per day. So it's not over a week's period of time. Every 30 minutes to an hour, they're stepping away because of the addictive nature of these products. So they will certainly go through, and this is 20 cigarettes. So each time they're hitting it, it is equivalent to going out and smoking a cigarette, essentially.
Well, and there's 40 to 50 puffs on that, so I would rebut that and say it would be about a half a cigarette. And that's not normal use. A, because it's by folks under the age of 21, and that's not a normal use pattern. You don't see adults smoking cigarettes every 15 minutes, so it wouldn't be normal for an adult to vape every 15 minutes, and I would say it would be even more abnormal for somebody of middle school or elementary school age to use these products at all, much less than that. So I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I'm just saying that is an extreme.
Let's get one last question. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Chanda Chun. Just like we have smoke detectors, has Arlington Public Schools evaluated or implemented vaping detectors, and I am aware that kids have found ways to get around them as well.
We've certainly discussed the vape detectors. However, they are very, very expensive, and they want you to have at least 2 vape detectors per bathroom, and they're about $1,500 a piece. I did talk to both of my principals. I sent them proposals, page after page, and I did not hear back from them. But that's simply because it's the cost. There's just no way with the amount of bathrooms we have in a school, and then the locker rooms, you would need several because the locker rooms are bigger. But we have young people doing this right in class. Because of the chemical, it dissipates very quickly. So they'll do it right in class and just blow it right into their shirt, that type of thing. So, the vape detectors are great, but just unfortunately just not within the realm of what we're able to do as a school system. But I've talked to the companies, like I said, I've done the proposals, and it's just, they're very expensive. So we hope at some point maybe they'll, come down in cost, or they'll come up with some other companies will come up with stuff like that. But, again, the bathrooms are definitely our hot spots, we know that, but these kids are doing it right in the middle of class. So because of the chemical that's surrounding it, and we see it, we know the numbers of violations we see every year. This is definitely the #1 offender in middle and high school in Arlington County Public Schools. Okay, so we have a significant number of violations. Our violations are happily going down for these devices. And that's because of our prevention efforts in the school and that ongoing education and giving kids opportunities to learn from their mistakes via programs like Second Chance, and to help support them and give them opportunities so they don't feel like bad people because they made a poor choice.
And I've got some great news for Ginny, and I think this would be a great way to end. We're actually working with Senator Emmett Hanger on a piece of legislation that would allow vapor detectors to be eligible for school security equipment grants, which would provide not only state but national funding to provide vapor detectors for public schools. So that would, I'd be more than happy to loop you in with that piece of legislation and how we can work together to get that across the.
Okay, with that, Jenny Sexton, Ruben Varghese, Dylan Bishop, thank you so much. I got to say that at least I learned a lot tonight, right? And I think everybody else did too. So come on up and smell the roses here. And then so you know what to stay away from. Okay, we'll see you all next month at HB Woodlawn at the Heights in Roslyn. Look on the website, and your information will be there. Now in April, I might add that we're on the third Wednesday, because it's the first day of Seder, first day of Passover, on the second Wednesday. So we're going to go to the third Wednesday, which is April 15, which is. You can rush from the post office right over to here. All right, thanks, everybody.